Welcome back to the Talk of Louisville. I'm Mike Mulroney.
I'm Kelly Duckworth.
Kelly, what a weekend. I heard you bought a boat.
No, I wish.
You didn't buy a boat?
No. The boat show is in town in Louisville, if you all didn't know. But it's basically, for me at least, not Mike. I walk around and look at everything I can't afford to buy.
Yeah, I've heard I'm a multimillionaire and got properties all over the country, so everybody thinks I'm rich. So we saw Mark out there, yeah.
I didn't see it. No, yeah. I was too busy fishing with my kid and chasing her around.
That booth ends up everywhere. I tell you, it's crazy. I wish I'd have invested in it when you asked me a long time ago. I didn't know what she's talking about, but here we are. So no boat. Yeah, some of those boats were $70, $80, $100, $200,000.
Yeah, I got on one. It was like $133,000. I was like, no thanks.
Yeah, the one Jenny wanted was $130,000. I was like,
the whole spun around.
Yeah, it's nuts. It was a good time. That started out as an adult weekend for us, for friends when we had younger kids, and we always go out there, but you can't afford anything anymore. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Speaking of affording things, Family Music, one of the best local music stores here in town. My son Graham picked up music about 5 or 6 years ago through Family Music, and it's been one of the best things for his confidence. You know, sports isn't for everybody, and music is a great alternative for people and kids to gain confidence on stage. So they're a fabulous group. They sell guitars, basses, keyboards, drums, anything, microphones, soundboards. So look them up. Family Music. They are at, I have to put my glasses on to see, 9837 3rd Street Road. Give Family Music a call for all your music needs. They do lessons, sales, repairs, everything. So check them out. They're amazing local business.
I don't have a musical bone in my body.
I don't either.
I can keep rhythm, but
I've owned 3 guitars my entire life and never learned to play any of them.
Yeah, my dad can, but not me.
Yeah. Producer Ryan here, he's a hell of a drum player, so he could probably speak to Family Music as well.
What's that band called that he's in?
Who, Ryan's?
Yeah.
The Wax Factory. There you go.
It destroys it. She hates it when people say the Wax Factory.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica. Wax Factory. How about that, Jessica? Sorry about that. She'll slap me next time I see her. So.
Well, who do we have today, Mike?
We have, I tell you, this is going to be an emotional documentary called 499 Days. And today we have Kristen and Jamie here with us today to talk about what 499 days is. And we were casually talking before we started. So, Jamie, this production's not out yet. It's a documentary. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a documentary in the works. We have, to be kind, we could call it a rough cut. We're still just kind of stringing things together, though. We've finished. I believe we finished what all we're going to shoot. We're just kind of putting the pieces together now. So yeah, not quite released yet. We think we're going to probably have something ready to start submitting to festivals and things later this year.
Well, we're excited to see it. I've watched on PBS. There's a 5-minute, like a trailer similar to what's on the Louisville Film Society website, and it brought me to tears. And I tell you, if you watch it, you have to be emotionally prepared for what you're going to watch. But Kristen, Kyler was your son. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what I picked up on the piece is he was diagnosed with, I don't think a lot of people know what DIPG is, and I know of it from another mutual friend we were talking about. But do you want to talk a little bit about DIPG and what happened? He was diagnosed at a very early age, from what I understand.
So Kyler was diagnosed when he was 8 years old. He had started getting really bad headaches that were consistent and were persistent. And his face started to change. And he was really sweet and kind. And this one weekend, he was just kind of grumpy and off. And so we noticed his balance was off. And so we took him to the hospital where I told him I thought he had a stroke. And they said that they rushed him back and found out he had DIPG.
So 8 years old, that's third grade. Is that correct?
Yes, he was in the third grade. Okay.
So DIPG, I don't know where they come up with these names, but it's diffuse intrinsic pontiglioma. Glioma, is that right? Like
glioma.
Glioma. Yeah, I couldn't see it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's a hard one to say.
But it's obviously very rare.
It is. When my son was diagnosed at the hospital here in Louisville, they said that he would be one of 3 possibly that year that they would see.
Out of the whole country?
Out of Louisville area. And that the country would be about 350 kids in the United States.
So 3 out of Kentucky, and I looked up a stat before we came in here. Unfortunately, Kentucky's leading the way for cancer diagnoses. Isn't that correct?
Yes. I am not always really great with all the stats. But yes, we are really on the bad end of how many kids are diagnosed and adults are diagnosed with cancer, specifically brain tumors in the state of Kentucky. We're like leading.
Did they give any information as to why? Is it something in our air? We're supposed to have this cleanest water in the country. I just wonder if it, obviously nobody knows, but I didn't know if they gave you any information of how this may have developed in Kyler.
No, basically bad luck. They don't know if it was genetic. They didn't know if it was hereditary, environmental. Basically, they just was like, it's bad luck. That's all they know at this point. It is a rare disease with not enough research being funded towards it. We're working on that as a lot of us here in Kentucky and other places are trying to get more research, but the same treatment that Neil Armstrong's 2-year-old daughter went through is about what is normal now, minus trials. And there's just not enough knowledge as to why it happens or what causes it.
So Kyler's 8 years old. He's in the hospital. You're thinking it's a stroke, and they start running all these different tests on him.
They did a CT scan, and they came back pretty quickly after that because they had rushed him when I said I thought he had a stroke and how he looked. And they said that he had bleeding on the brain and a mass. But the bleeding on the brain ended up being hydrocephalus, and the mass ended up being DIPG.
So catching this early doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when it catches DIPG because it's from what the documentary or the 5-minute PBS special I saw said it's basically a terminal diagnosis. Is that correct? So it wouldn't have mattered if they'd have caught it earlier or not?
Correct. There's no way of curing it because of where it's located. You can't remove it like a normal mass. And it's protected by a blood barrier within your brain. So getting chemo there is even harder. So even if he was diagnosed months or even whenever it had very first started, all I would have gotten is more time with him, but it wouldn't have changed the outcome.
So I know there was another young man, and we're going to talk to his mom here in a few weeks, that had it, and they went on a tour to show him everything they could before they passed. Did you all do that? Is that what the documentary is going to talk a little bit about, Jamie? Is what you all went through? And what's the documentary? Is it going to cover what you all did to try and let him live his life a little bit before he passed, or is it about the path that they took medically to treating?
You know, it's a little bit of all of that. It's a little bit of each piece. So it's essentially what we're trying to do. So I think the easiest way to say it is that we're making this documentary for 3 reasons. We're making it for sharing Kyler with the world and how special a little boy he was, and how wonderful and sweet, funny, and just caring and unique, just all the, beautiful adjectives you can throw at that little boy and his spirit. We're also doing it as an awareness piece to just let people know, as we've brought up already on this episode, on this podcast. Even people in the medical community don't know what diffuse intrinsic, pontine glioma is. It's a mouthful. It's very rare, and it's brutal. It's deadly. It's all the things. So awareness, trying to help raise funding. There's going to be an impact element to the release. And then the third, which I think is the most important, and Kristen's really the one that hammers this home best, I think, is we're making it to Kristen. I'll let you. I always butcher the quote that you so beautifully mention all the time, but essentially a survival guide to anyone else, who could get this diagnosis, sort of taking our experience. terrible thing that actually ended up bringing our family together in a lot of ways, which is another piece of the documentary. But just to create sort of a bit of a survival guide for anyone else down the line who's going to get this terrible diagnosis.
Yeah, Kristen, I'll let you tell the quote word for word, but I think it was something to remember your struggle and tell your story as a survival guide. Is that pretty close to what you said?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact quote because when we were at Family House had posted it on their website, their like Instagram account or whatever thing I was looking at. And I thought how like beautiful it was. Basically like everything that you're going through will be somebody else's survival guide. And as soon as I find the correct quote, because I have a few pictures to go through, it's a really beautiful message because it's like everything that we went through is so hard and challenging. And I'm hoping that being able to share Kyler and our story with the world will help some family in the future who is told at the hospital, your child has up to maybe 9 months to live, maybe more if you're lucky, maybe less if you're not. And that they'll be able to have some way of knowing that they're not alone. There is a vast network of families who want to support other families going through it, and that there are lots of resources out there to help you financially, emotionally, and just whatever you need.
How long ago did he pass?
He passed March 2nd, 2021.
Wow.
He was 9 years old.
And that's where the title comes from, right? That's how many days you all had with him after diagnosis?
Yes. From the day that he was diagnosed, the day he passed was 499 days. And I find it like it's hard because I didn't even get 500 days. It's just right short of that 400, that 500 just by one day. I don't know, something about numbers with me and seeing that. I told Jamie that. And so I'm glad that we get to share his story. But I wish I had obviously more time with my son than 499 days.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around it on how. Do you have any other kids?
I have an older son that's Jacob and Kyler are my oldest children from my marriage with Jamie's brother, Jeff. And then I have a daughter with my husband now she was not even 2 when Kyler was diagnosed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how, and I'm sure emotionally you've dealt with this, but I would think the only thing that would keep me around is my other kids and being able to live for them, I would think. But, it's such a tragic thing. I can't remember the number. Norton had told us this once before that there's only like 2 drugs or 3 drugs since the 70s or 80s that have even been available for kids. Nothing new. And, I think, and I know this is correct because it's been brought up before, but they won't really focus on a cure for something until there's enough money to be made off the cure. And that's unfortunate. Is that correct, Jamie? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's just, it's one of those things, were I a different filmmaker and were our aims different, we could be making probably a dozen different movies. We could go full Aaron Brockovich and try and figure out what we were talking about earlier with why are Kentucky kids getting more, cancer diagnosis than other parts of the country and world? Is coal slurry? Is it something in the air? Is it all those things? We could be completely diving into that sort of thing. We do not focus on that. We may mention it here and there, but then also, we could be making a whole takedown from the pediatric cancer perspective of these research, pathways and options, which are just criminally underfunded, which to a degree you understand because it's so rare. And yes, we do live in a capitalist society. We are going to be run by sort of big pharma. So is there money to be made off of about 350 kids per year in America, and really pumping research into getting that, that moving the needle on that treatment? And the answer is no, but that's no reason to keep letting our kids die. decades and decades and decades down the line.
Yeah.
The story is the most jarring thing to bring up, because really the treatment that Kyler was able to receive, other than the 2 clinical trials that he was so fortunate to be a part of, we were so fortunate to be a part of, almost undefinable, like completely not different from what Neil Armstrong's daughter experienced back in, I think it was 1962, which is absolutely insane.
So, yeah, so 62 to now, they still haven't come up with anything new.
No, because listen, there's probably a myriad reasons, but largely, there's no money in it.
That's exactly right. 350 kids annually diagnosed. They're not going to put any money towards it. But I tell you what, they found billions of dollars instantly to chase this COVID stuff back when it happened. But yet they can't pump a couple $100 million into something to save kids' lives. But it boils down to money. I really do believe.
Yeah. And listen, I'm very proud that we're trying to focus really hard on making this particular movie apolitical, because I find that the story and the cause itself is very across the aisle, very apolitical, very, listen, we say it in the movie a couple of times. I think we at least said it in a few interviews, there is no red, there is no blue, there is no left, there is no right when kids are dying.
Absolutely. But my point is, they found billions of dollars when they needed to. Why can't they find money to pump into kids' cancer, especially, is my point.
100%. And then, and listen, I don't have these statistics, but I'm hearing rumors that the current administration is, the new administration is taking cancer funding, millions, maybe billions of dollars away from cancer research in general. Forget pediatric cancer.
Yeah.
And so it's, but again, it's no matter who's in charge, no matter who's doing what, no matter what, the money is that. Your point remains, right? The money is there.
Yeah.
We're going to find
it
money
is
if we care enough about it. And that's part of what the documentary is about, is trying to make people aware of this particular disease. I've been saying quite a bit. We're trying, because everybody's like, oh, do you want to talk to this person? And you can talk to this family, and you can talk to we can be doing an endless series, unfortunately, of different families affected by DIPG and pediatric cancer. But we're trying to hit a universal through the specific. We're telling Kyler's story. We're talking mainly about DIPG, DMG, pediatric brain cancers, because we want to bring awareness to the fact that cancer research is underfunded, particularly pediatric cancer, which is vastly different in countless ways that plenty of doctors speak to in our movie, or will speak to in our movie, and have spoken in our interviews. Pediatric cancer is completely different than adult cancer. It needs to be funded differently. It needs to be approached differently. But overall, if you continue zooming out, really we're making a movie about how we are not doing enough to try to eradicate cancer. We can get there if we really focus on it. And we just need to, myself, if they're trying to take this particular opportunity, this one little boy's story that I'm very close to really push something that I think can change the world. Absolutely. I've said, if I'm being the most efficient version of myself in the moment, I've worked for, I think it's 23 years on huge Hollywood movies, all these big fun things I've been very fortunate to be a part of. Nothing is going to be more important than what we're trying to do with this movie. And I joke on sets a lot of times when people get too harried, or when stories get too, or, when people get to start working too fast, or things start looking unsafe, or people start getting tired. I always am like, slow down, take a second. We're not curing cancer. Genuinely, what we're trying to do with this movie is cure cancer. That's 100% my aim. Are we going to do it? Probably not. But you know what? We're going to move the needle, and we're going to make a lot more people fired up about it than they were before they watched.
Well, unfortunately, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if this can raise enough eyebrows and get the right person to pay attention, maybe they'll start putting some more money towards it. To me, 350 kids' lives need to be saved. My mom, what started the entire thing with Shirley's Way is my mom died from liver cancer, and it was horrible to watch. And I look at it, and she lived for 63 years. Kyler only lived for 9 years. And to me, it's completely unfair on how that works. But, Kristen, I know I saw in the PBS spot that Governor Beshear signed a bill. Have you talked to him? Are they willing to start pouring some money in Kentucky to really chase this cure?
Absolutely. He's the kindest person.
I know he is. He's very nice.
We just call him Andy because he's that nice.
Yeah.
We call Governor Bashir. We
Yeah,
call
yeah.
him Andy because that's how he treats us. He listens to us. He knows it's important. He has a personal connection with David that Liz will talk about when you talk to her. Liz is amazing about making sure that our kids are not forgotten. And her and Bashir are just, and then there's Senator Wise, who is also impacted by childhood cancer. Like, all of them really care about making sure that nobody has to go through this. Their children, they want to make sure that everybody gets the funding, the research, and hopefully the cures that, for me and Liz, our sons did not get to have. And I'm hoping that, that's something that, will continue as long as he's in office and beyond, because I know it's something that's very important to him to make sure that we continually, he said it's like the easiest yes he has, to say yes to this.
Well, Kentucky also, and I think, to offset, you go to 499days.com, you'll hit a crowdfunding site, watch the video attached there, that crowdfunding thing done, and we're very thankful to everybody that took part of it, was part of it with us. But you'll see a video, and I'll link you to a YouTube video there. You can watch, and this wonderful woman, Lori, said it pretty well in that Kentucky is on the wrong end of too many lists, and this cancer diagnosis thing is one of them. But as far as being top of lists, Governor Bashir, Kentucky is one of, figure out what, I think there may only be one or two other states that actually dedicates state tax dollars to pediatric cancer research. And, catch me on I'm always a proud Kentuckian, warts and all. There are things, as we all know, our state could do much better, right? But one of the most proud things in my core about being a Kentuckian is that fact. We're one of the only states that gives state tax dollars to pediatric research. It's amazing.
I didn't know that. Are they going to increase the amount of money here soon, or do you have any idea what they're planning?
We are going back in February for more advocacy. I know that they just passed, was it like 12.5 million? And they had increased it from the previous, whatever it's called, when they're in previous session, I guess, because they do it like every 2 years when they do the budgets.
Yeah.
And so it was like 7 point something, and then it increased to 12. So yes, they keep increasing it because to Bashir and Senator Wise, and there's another congressman who also has a child that was impacted, I believe. So for them, they're very quick to be like, we need the funding, we need the research, and it's yes.
Yeah, often I don't think they move unless they've been impacted. So it's good, and I hate to say it's good, but it's good that they've seen or know what it takes in the pain. So that way they're moved a little bit to try and get some legislation. But we follow them closely now because of on the charitable gaming side that we've built. So I don't think this year's a budget year. So I don't know if that.
I don't think so.
Yes, I think that means they won't be approving any new funding for anything this session, but maybe next session. I don't know.
I think that the way that we go is just to make sure that we stay on that radar, to make sure that nobody forgets about us. So anytime Liz says, "Hey, we're doing this," I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to go help." And I just show up where Liz tells me to go. Yeah,
she's a fireball. I think with her behind this, and she's going to keep pushing and pushing until she gets an answer. Is she kind of leading the way on that, or who else is anybody else impactful that's really pushing for this?
I know that she is the person that I go through, and she reaches out to someone that works for Bashir. Her name is Kinsey, and she also was impacted as a child who survived childhood cancer. But that's her mom's the CEO of Gilda's Club.
Oh yeah,
and so they keep pushing it too, and so there's quite a few people that have roles that I'm not always familiar with. I just go where Liz tells me to go and tell my story whenever somebody asks me to tell Kyler's story, so that hopefully that will help in any way that is needed to be able to talk about Kyler and share our journey.
I have no idea about your faith, if you even have any, but I grew up Catholic, and seeing what I see every day, it's really kind of hurt my faith. I've always wondered, is there really someplace other when you leave Earth? Had that impacted you at all?
Yes.
From that perspective?
I asked the priest whenever Kyler was first diagnosed why this happened, because I'm also Catholic, and I was just mad. And he said, God didn't do this, and it took me a very long term to come to my own realization that God wouldn't do this; the evil would do this, and that's how I see it. And I have to believe that there's something after this, because if not, then I won't get to see and hold my son again. So That's what keeps me going in my faith, is knowing that I am here on earth until I am called to be with my son. And my mom actually passed away 13 days before my son. And so I get to, the only way I process both of them being gone at the same time is that my mom left this earth to catch my son.
To be there and help him out. That makes all the sense in the world. So 13 days before she passed away?
Yes.
When was this? What month?
February 5th. She was at my house, said she had a headache, went to the hospital on the 6th, never recovered, and she developed hydrocephalus, just like my son had. And had not a brain aneurysm, but basically something happened to her brain where she had bleeding on her brain, and she damaged her frontal lobe, which she never recovered from, and so she passed 13 days before he did.
Wow, you need to take the whole month of February off. That's horrible. My mom died on my oldest sister's birthday, and she doesn't really celebrate her birthday much anymore. Of course, when you get older, you don't celebrate them. You don't want them to slow down. But it was huge. It was it was tough to have that on her birthday as well. So Jamie, go ahead.
I think. Well, I was just gonna say, and sorry, Zoom things. I always feel like we're interrupting one another.
You're fine. Go ahead.
I think part of this effort, and Kristen and I have talked about this a bit, is that it would be, I don't want to say easy. It's so hard to talk about this stuff sometimes. And it's a logical path that you would go down into what you said, take the month of February off. It's brutal. It's sad. It's awful. We're trying our best with this movie to do, I don't know if you're familiar with New Orleans culture.
Not a lot.
And
party.
And how there's a lot of sort of celebration in the passing onto the next realm, whatever you believe it to be. Passing, elevating to the next plane. And so they do something called a second line, which is, it's a brass band, parade through the streets of New Orleans. And it's a celebration of a life. It's a celebration of, who the person was and what is going to be in the next life. And I think, I don't know, who knows why that jumped to my mind, but I want to look at this documentary. We want to look at this documentary as a way to celebrate Kyler and to take what, was a very painful, very awful thing and turn it into something genuinely priceless, which is helping others who can learn from his story, from our story, from the way that, listen, we have family that had drama and nonsense kind of going on as we all do, I think, our families at different times. And as soon as Kyler got sick, as soon as all of this started happening, I watched my entire family come together in a way that I never would have anticipated, and watched so much stuff that seemed so important for so long melt away into oblivion. And
it becomes unimportant.
The only thing that was important was Kyler.
Yeah.
The only thing that was important was what was happening with this little boy. And I want to celebrate the power of that. We want to celebrate the power of that. We want to celebrate the power of community, of the fact that you aren't on an island when you're going through these things. And that, we lost a beautiful, beautiful little soul. But through that, we're going to hopefully save a lot of souls, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I get that.
As a very admittedly lapsed Catholic personally, but a very incredibly spiritual person, I think I've gotten over 45 years. I've gotten very I've gotten less religious, but infinitely more spiritual, if that makes sense. That's been my path, and that's what I'm hoping we can try to accomplish with this story. It is all very sad, but I think there's a lot of good that can come from it if you really lean into that idea. Absolutely.
Do you have kids, Jamie?
I don't, believe it or not. No. So that's part of why I get me emotional. I don't have kids. Me and my wife have been together for quite some time. We have 2 little dogs that feel like kids sometimes.
Oh yeah. Well, only reason I ask, and Kristen, you can vouch for this. So, as an older person, if you leave Earth early, like as a parent, the one thing that I want to be able to do is make sure my kids and wife are taken care of. So, if, one of the big things with my mom is she loved kids. She couldn't wait to have grandkids, and she died before she could really enjoy them. So that's kind of where I was leaning into that. So as a parent, Kristen, we want to protect our kids. And then when they're diagnosed with something like that, you feel so helpless. Like there's nothing you can do. I tell people all the time, it's not something that Advil and a Band-Aid will fix.
No, it was quite painful, and there was nothing. I mean, I don't even know how to go back to those moments sometimes in my thoughts, because my life separated and went from before Kyler was diagnosed to when Kyler was sick to after Kyler passed, and all the memories before he was diagnosed are really hard to recall, because it was such a traumatic experience to feel that I'm not going to get to see my child grow up. I don't know what kind, even just seeing him slowly slip away little piece by little piece was hard, and knowing that he was trapped inside and there's nothing I could do to help him or save him.
Yeah.
Kristen, can you if you want, can you kind of explain that for the people that are listening? I watched the PBS clip as well, so I remember, seeing pictures and videos, but I'm assuming you have a lively, 8-year-old little boy, and then all of a sudden you get the diagnosis, and then how does it look? How do things progress from there?
So Kyler was rambunctious, hilarious. I never met a child that had such good comedic timing. He just was hilarious. And just a couple weeks before he was diagnosed, we were selling popcorn for Cub Scouts, and his older brother, who was about 18 and a half, 19 months older, was bopping around, and Kyler walked over and slapped him on the face and said, "Keep your eyes on the prize." And it's just he was so perfectly funny and kind, and to see that go into somebody who was having a hard time walking, talking,
couldn't see,
got to a point we couldn't understand him.
And you said, I think in a little spot we saw, he lost his vision too. Is that right?
No, his eyes messed up a little bit, but he never lost his ability to see, as far as I know.
Okay.
He lost his ability to talk, walk, eat, move. Basically just think of all of your body slowly turning off, but you're still trapped inside of it. That's how it was for Kyler. And basically for the last several weeks, it was just, he slept because he couldn't do anything. And just watching that happen, I wouldn't wish that on my very worst enemy. It's just hard to even think about what he had to go through. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save him. I couldn't fix anything. I could just give him medicine to make it maybe less painful. But that was it. That was all I could do for him. And
comfort.
that was devastating.
Well, and also it's Kristen, you can just close your ears if you want for a second. It's a very interesting part of the process. She is so incredibly brave, even being able to relive a lot of these moments and help us make this movie, which, we agreed, it was honestly Kristen's idea initially, when I was boohooing, being typical Hollywood type and being like, oh, I'm so sorry, I wasn't around, I wish I could have helped more. And she basically, I'll paraphrase and said, shut up. The only thing I'll ask of you, you were around as much as you could be, and we love you, and we're all in this together. If I can selfishly ask anything of you, let's make a documentary documenting this experience. I joked that she could have said, give me a giraffe and a G6 in that moment. I would have been like, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you need. But, through this process, and it's such a prideful thing to, we're making a movie about how wonderful Kristen was through this too. She made this wonderful communication book that when Kyler got into later stages of really barely only being able to communicate by essentially gesturing toward certain boxes, she'd have a whole flip page, and we do a great section of this in the movie, and we're going to animate these little guys, we think. But basically, there's characters from these video games that he liked, and Captain Underpants and whatnot. It was like, do you feel sad? Do you feel hungry? Do you need to go to the bathroom? And she was so above and beyond. And listen, any mother, any parent going through this, and like I said, we don't have kids. Our nephews and nieces are lives, me and my wife. So everyone does what they can, but I really want to highlight, I personally really want to highlight how amazing Kristen was through this process, in really just like making it as comfortable, as easy as just being so thorough through this whole process for Kyler.
Yeah.
And to speak on that real quick, Kyler being the silly Kyler that he was, I made one page for spelling, and he would bypass all the pictures and go to the back and try to spell everything out to me that was in pictures, because it was like, Kyler, just point to a picture, and he would go like, no, we're going to finger spell this word out, and he's terrible at spelling. So it was like, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
wow. Bathroom.
Well, that's kind of him saying, hey, I'm not giving up. Probably, I'm going to do this no matter what, is what it sounds like to me. So, well, such an incredible story. We can't wait for the documentary to come out. What's the plan? Do you have a planned date that it'll be out?
I don't want to necessarily nail us down to a date. I was saying earlier, I think before we were on the air, with these things you got to do, you go good, fast, and cheap. You only get to pick two, right? So right now we're going good and cheap. But we do have a little bit of an assembly cut. They call it kind of a rough cut going. We're putting some pieces together. Kristen's helping pick out a lot of really good archival, video and photos from her collection. So we're aiming to be sort of at a little bit better place this summer, and probably start submitting to festivals and things in the fall. So earliest is we would be, in some of the later this year fall festivals, or early, kind of around this time next year festivals. So we're shooting for the moon on this thing. Which I like to say, because there is an initiative at the White House called the Cancer Moonshot Initiative. And that's what we're shooting for the moon. We're trying to get to the big festivals and get this thing out into the world. So somewhere within the next 6 months to a year, we'll be kind of out in the world. We're hoping.
Well, we're going to wrap it up here in a minute, but what are we going to see? Can you give us a highlight? Kristen, is it going to be when you contacted Jamie and said, just do the documentary? Does it start right after he was diagnosed and then show that you all are out trying to enjoy some life with Kyler? And then is that what we're going to, is little brief tidbits of what we might see in the documentary?
It starts off with us talking about how our family was, and then how we kind of separated and things kind of broke, and then how we came back together. And it talks about Kyler's journey, making sure that we talk about everything that we went through. I mean, Liz got to go do a lot of those things with her son, and I wasn't able to do as much with Kyler because Kyler was diagnosed and then COVID happened.
Oh, yeah.
So we were traveling to San Francisco and coming home on an empty airline. Where we were the only family on it, because it was April of 2020 when we were traveling. Wow. And so it talks a lot about like the challenges of childhood cancer and COVID, and then kind of talks about stats and things like that and other families like Liz. But I'm hoping that it will be a really good resource for somebody. And my husband, who's sitting next to me, found the quote about, one day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become a part of someone else's survival guide.
I love that. Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, like, being able to tell Kyler's story and him to be able to live on through the photos, the videos, and the retelling of his life, that even though I don't get to keep my son forever and hug him and hold him, I'll at least get to have him live on forever through this.
Yeah.
And hopefully help other people.
Yeah. Somebody shared a video with my sister once, not too long ago, with my mom sitting at the table, just kind of randomly talking. And we've kept that video because it's so good to hear her voice sometimes, you know, and I'm sure this is going to have those moments for you, as painful as it is. At least it'll be documented so you can kind of look back and watch and listen to him a little bit, you know? So, well.
And when I asked Jamie about the documentary, I videotaped a lot of stuff for the documentary in case we ever got to do it. So I'm hoping that it really does a good job of telling Kyler's story.
Yeah, I was wondering if you all followed him around with a video camera, or if it was done with like a phone. So it sounds like a little of both.
Yeah, I kind of videotaped and recorded my kids a lot, so it kind of worked out. Yeah,
well, amazing story.
I will say, for a filmmaker trying to make a documentary about a particular subject, sometimes you hear about these ones, they have a lot of trouble scraping together footage. We have the opposite problem, honestly. If we wanted to do a multi-season series about little Tyler, we could absolutely easily do it. But we're gonna shoot for that like 90 minutes or so. To say that we're lucky to have such a prolific archivist, I think would be the best way to say it.
It's we're excited about it. I'll talk to you offline, Jamie. I don't know what it costs to put something like that together, but we'll be willing to help if we need to. But I'd also, it's I'd love to tell the story of people trying to survive disease, financially and everything else. And we've talked to a few people about trying to tell that story. So we can talk offline later, and maybe we might have another project that we would maybe team up on and kind of talk about what people go through, when they're fighting a disease like cancer, because it not only ruins your body, but it ruins you financially. And I did talk to a doctor not too long ago, actually the doctor that diagnosed my mom. And I said, will there ever be a cure for cancer? He said, yep, within the next 5 years. He said, but the problem is most people won't be able to afford it. So that goes back to your capitalistic comment earlier that, how do we get around that? Why would it cost $1 million to save somebody's life? And to me, that is so wrong. But that's what he said. So
and the answer is because it can. Is because we live in a capitalist society, and because the people in charge can make it cost them. There's a little boy and we're gonna have a little piece of this in the documentary, I think, as well towards the end. But there's a little boy that has been, by all means, really by all technical terms, really has been cured, quote unquote, from DIPG through a clinical trial. It's a Belgian boy through this French clinical trial, I believe it was. I may be flipping those two, but it's so Dr. Jacques Grill, the fellow's name, and but now there's so much money and so much time required, and sort of being like, okay, what was that particular brain tumor mutation? What was that particular secret sauce in that clinical trial? And you have to reverse engineer all these things and figure out exactly what the pieces were. And all of that takes so much time, 5 to 10 years most of the time. And just the funding that it takes professionals across the globe to get those things figured out. It's right there at our fingertips. But we have to dedicate the resources that it's going to take to get it done, to prioritize what it's going to take to save these kids.
Yeah, we got to stop politicizing this stuff and stop making it so expensive. I got a friend of mine, her mom was diagnosed with cancer. I don't remember what form it was. She got into a clinical trial, and her mom lived 12 years with the clinical trial. Oddly enough, her dad, which was the lady's husband, was diagnosed with the exact same cancer. The clinical trial had ended. They realized there wasn't enough money to be made off this particular medication, and he lived 6 months.
Yeah.
But it all boiled down to money, and it really did. And to me, that's disgusting. Like I said, they came up with so much money for COVID, but yet they can't figure out how to pump money in and fix the problem that we're seeing with cancer, kids cancer, and all these other diseases. And I was going to ask earlier, and I think that answered my question, because you said the one trial that cured somebody from DIPG was outside the U.S. I hear a lot of people traveling to different countries for treatments. And I always wonder, are we really leading the way, or does money get in the way? And I think that answers it. So,
well, there's a really interesting, it's this is what happens in these interviews is, you're touching on a lot of things we touch on in the documentary. There's a wonderful organization that ran Kyler's clinical trial in San Francisco that he went to out at UCSF called PMOC, which is the Pediatric Neuro-Oncological Consortium. I think I said all that right. But they basically are a group of doctors, and look, Dr. Sabine, who's one of the founders and heads of that, would probably hate for me distilling it like this, but this is my sense of it, is that PMOC was a group of doctors that got so fed up with the red tape of government funding, not only in America, but across the world, of just getting clinical trials started and trying to do what the most brilliant minds in the world can do, that these doctors said, well, listen, if the governments aren't going to help us, the pathways that we are supposed to take aren't going to help us, we're just going to create our own thing. We're going to create our own pathway and improve our own clinical trial and do things that way. And that's one of the most brilliant things. And I think that's really how work gets done in a real way. I appreciate that we live in a society, and I appreciate that capitalism and all of these things have gotten us to a certain point, in our society and our civilization globally, everything. But at a certain point, rubber hits the road when real human beings start to help real human beings with the talents and resources that they have directly that take effect. So
I agree totally with what you just said. Totally agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
But government is, as much as we need them for certain things, they get in the way, and they throw so much red tape out there to be so cautionary on things that it keeps you from really thinking blazing new paths. But I only worry that if those doctors did that, are they taking a risk of losing their license in the medical field because they're going against some of the stuff? But, sometimes it takes people like that to really blaze trails and make a difference. So hats off to those folks for doing that.
No risk, no reward.
Yeah, for sure.
I like that, right?
Well, thank you all so much. The film, just give a plug where people can see it once it's available. Will it only be through LouisvilleFilmSociety.org, or will it be someplace else?
Yeah. No. When it's really that the way these things go, we're going to be hitting the film festival circuit probably. It could go a bunch of different ways. We could get snatched up by a distributor before we're even finished. We could partner with a production company that we'll have a dedicated pipeline for it to come out. So it really depends. Probably most likely is we do the film festival circuit, get a distributor, who will put it up on your, ideally like a Netflix or like Amazon Prime, Hulu type thing. And then it'll be available streaming. But really what I want to do ultimately is, once we're through the film festival circuit, is do what we're going to call an impact campaign tour, going to different pediatric hospitals and different learning facilities and cancer care communities, and really just doing a tour of the movie theatrically so that we can get it in front of the people that really are going to grasp the most benefit and message from this. So that'll probably be the path. It'll be like festivals, do that, find a distributor, do that tour to different facilities for that kind of impact, and then we'll move on to streaming. So it's hard to really say. The life of an independent film is a little unclear until it happens, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, such an amazing story. I will commit, though, as long as we're fighting legislature, and we're having some success on charitable gaming, that's where all of our money's coming from. So if that doesn't disappear, when you're ready to go, we'd be willing to rent a theater or a library or something and make it open to the public that people can come and watch it. And I think that would be pretty incredible. So
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to talk more about charitable gaming too. If I can start If I can turn blackjack into charity, let's go.
We have electronic pull tab machines that play like paper pull tabs. So you both said you were Catholic, so you know what a pull tab is. But it's a digital form of that that's licensed through the state of Kentucky, and that's what's been generating the money that we are able to pump back in the community. So we gave away $4.5 million last year.
That's amazing.
To people who are sick, other nonprofits and things like that. So yeah, my commitment, if that doesn't go away, if you'd be willing, we'll rent a theater, we'll find a room, a library, and bring in a bunch of people to let them see this film. So that'd be pretty cool.
That's great, man. Beyond words. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah. No problem. It's streamed, so we can all share it, and let's get the word out. Liz is coming in here soon, so Kristen, if you want to join her, it'd be great to have you all kind of go back and forth. But thank you all so much for your time today. Such a remarkable story. We're looking forward to seeing this documentary. It's going to be incredible.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Thanks for having us.
Thank you all so much.
Have a good one.
Goodbye.